Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. We're here with another one of our guest hosts, Revant, and we thought we'd talk about the job hunt in COVID. So Revant's going to look for a summer internship upcoming, and it's a pretty challenging market out there, right? So we're going to chat a little bit about some of the challenges he's facing, and maybe some of the more creative ways to get through them. So Revant, tell us a little bit more about what you're up to and some of the challenges that you've gone through, and like kind of what you've done so far in terms of the job hunt.
So to be honest, I think I've been studying since the last 2 years. So now is the time in the semester I was feeling like I think I need to go for an internship and get some rest from studies and get some actual practical work done in the meantime. So I started my job hunt in Jan, and I think I applied to more than 60 jobs, and I waited and waited and waited, and probably after in the next month also, I didn't even get a response, neither for acceptance or rejection from any of the firms. And it's been almost 2 months, and I yet haven't secured anything. So I'm assuming there are lesser jobs available now since because of this pandemic, and because the companies are actually laying off employees to reduce their costs. And I doubt they would be interested in hiring anyone right now. So sorry. So that is one of the main reasons wherein most people, including me and my peers, aren't securing an internship, and we hope the market gets better soon.
Yeah, and I guess for a lot of folks, they have the assumption that people are not hiring, right? Just because the economy is doing so bad. But if you actually think about it from a broader perspective, there are tons of companies hiring all the time, but probably not as prevalently as before, right? So there is a lot of activity happening in the hiring space, but it tends to be a little bit more hidden. So a couple of things. So we're recording this on in March, early March, and you started in Jan. So 60 applications during that time is actually a decent number, right? So my general benchmarks is with that, you should probably have expected 1 to 2, if not 6 interviews, right? With a solid resume. So one thing that I would encourage you to think about is, are you tailoring your resumes for each of the job descriptions?
Yes, I think I was working with the UTSC co-op department, and I think I've followed their guidelines. And after I got a go-ahead from them, uh, I probably had some of the adequate qualifications also for the sectors I was applying in. And I think one of the main reasons could be that uh, because of COVID, there are not many on-campus career fairs, and you don't get a network and have that one-on-one face-to-face interaction in person. So probably the only thing which it has come down to right now is online networking on platforms such as LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and Indeed, wherein you probably don't get much of a chance to interact unless you have some alumni of your university out there, or if you can just directly send them a message. Unless So what I had done was I tried to send a couple of people with similar interests and similar backgrounds a message, but I it was quite dry, and I didn't get a response. I just started a conversation, but I feel they're just people who have the similar interests as me, but obviously they don't they're not the ones to take the final decision of hiring. So in fact, it kind of escalated in one of my job applications, wherein I reached out, like I was connected to the HR of the company. And however, once I was connected to them and the preferred role I wanted, there was no vacancy for that. So
Sure.
that's why, and I want to, I'm passionate. I want to only secure a job or an internship wherein I'm passionate about what I do, and I don't want to work in a company or in a job role which isn't going to benefit me in my future career, right?
Sure.
So I feel despite applying to many jobs through online portals, it has been a little difficult because the one-on-one interaction with companies really makes a big difference.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a couple of things on that. So there's a lot of ways where I could probably suggest in terms of improving the job hunt, right? So for me, if someone has applied to 60 applications and you feel that you can do the job and you have good qualifications, then in all honesty, that your resume needs to be updated, right? Because there's something that's missing between there. Because from a numbers game, you should expect every 2 to 5%, 2 to 10% of applications turning into an interview, right? If you have a solid resume, right? If you're below that, where 0 of 60, I mean, you're below that, right? Then that means your resume isn't positioned well enough, right? So that's why I asked you about tailoring the resume, because that's one thing that a lot of folks kind of misunderstand, right? So the easiest example that I encourage folks to think about is the game of bingo, right? So you're familiar with bingo, right? So if you think of the numbers 1 to 75 as the universe of all of the things that an employer is looking for a particular job, right? And the 75, that like a computer scientist versus investment banker versus an accountant versus lawyer, they'll be different, right? But generally, for any role, there'll be a bunch of them that are there. The job description is the bingo card, right? So if you know it says BINGO, it's 5 by 5, and you have a free space in the middle. So it'll say, I'm looking for B5, I'm looking for N33, G57, and O71, right? Those are the numbers I'm having. But if you are not reverse engineering and tailoring your resume, then they're asking for B5, and you're saying I16, and they're like, well, okay, but I asked for N32, and you're saying um, 69, right? So when they don't match, then it of course is relevant for the role, but it's not necessarily relevant for that particular person hiring, right? So that's why I encourage folks to really focus on that tailoring, right? Are you really reverse engineering? And if you're not doing it properly, then they're not able to say bingo, right? And bingo means giving you an interview, right? So I'd probably, we can work offline in terms of tweaking your process to do that, but that's on the traditional method, right? So the traditional method is apply online and hopefully go through the interview process and then get selected and offer, right? But a lot of folks don't realize that that's probably only, call it 20 to 25% of the market, right? There's so many more companies. There's so many medium and small companies that don't even post online, right? They go at, I think the stat is in Canada about I think 90 something percent of all companies are small businesses, right? Some of them are one person solo businesses. Some of them are 5, 10, 200 people businesses. But because folks are targeting the large ones, then they often don't get on their radar. So on the networking, I think you started well, where you're looking to connect with people of interest, starting a conversation, but maybe expand more broadly of like the medium and small companies and build a relationship with them. So the challenge that I found a lot of folks doing is they're connecting to get a job, right? They're almost trying to sell them something versus connecting to build a relationship, connecting to be curious and interested. And then oftentimes that's when the job is more likely to happen because they believe and trust you instead of feeling that you're trying to sell them on something, right? Because nobody wants to feel used and things like that. So a way to do that is actually to do something for them, right? So one of the examples that I often share, or I'll give two, is one. There was a client I had. They wanted to get into equity research, and basically he connected with someone and learned about what they were doing. So I don't know a lot about it, but he mentioned something about they do reports, right, on a particular industry. I think he was working in transportation, and he says, well, we do about a report a week, right? Or whatever the number was. And he said, well, what about all the other companies? Because there's hundreds of companies in that industry. Well, in that regard, people are only interested in either the top companies or like up and coming companies. Everybody else, it's kind of like meh. So what he ended up doing is spending a weekend and basically saying, okay, let me produce a report for a company you've never covered before and make it look like something that you've done, right? And then he shared it with that person, right? And he said, wow, this is great. This is amazing. Well, this is a little bit off. You need to update this. But he got some good feedback and he demonstrated that they're able to take initiative. They're able to do the work, right? Now, in my opinion, like how much better is that versus a resume, versus a cover
Mhm.
letter, right? Even versus an interview, right? Because it actually shows work that they put in, right? And the other part is who does that, right? There's a quote that comes to mind that the extra mile is never crowded, right? So if you go the extra mile and do this stuff, then you'll definitely set yourself apart. Now, that doesn't mean you'll get it 100% of the time, but maybe less, maybe more than 0% is what
Mhm.
you'll do. And if you don't do it, then obviously you won't get it. Another example is, so for that person, he didn't end up getting hired right away, but I think someone ended up leaving like 3 or 6 months later, and then they stayed connected, and then he got an offer, right? Because they stayed connected, and he demonstrated that he could do it, and that was probably largely without all of the complexities of submitting the resumes and things like that. They had to do it because that's part of the administration, right? They have to have a resume in the system and whatever. But it was less about the content of the resume and more that just to double check all the experience that they had, right? That's one example. Another example is I have a colleague who wanted to get into copywriting, so writing for websites, for marketing, for whatever, right? So he asked like, could I blog for you? I'm like, okay, sure. I need someone to help me with content. So he started blogging for me on a consistent basis, weekly, and he basically produced a lot of good work, right? And then he would leverage that for his portfolio to say, hey, I've done it for a company, even though I'm volunteering for them. Um, I'm using their platform to kind of distribute the work, right? And he got job offers, right? And then he kept on doing it and building his portfolio, and he got more job offers and kept on upgrading it and stuff like that. So those are ones where if you can think of more creative ways to demonstrate the value, because otherwise you're in a pile of resumes. Right, a huge pile with even more nowadays because there's more unemployment and more people looking, with fewer roles out there. So if you can be more creative and apply that to your current situation, then I think that would be helpful. So why don't we turn that to kind of your particular situation and say, okay, what are the companies that you can find that are probably not the top big companies that would probably give you like a good enough experience? So maybe spending a weekend and researching what are those companies. And the interesting thing with COVID is they don't even have to be local, right? They could be elsewhere. Now, if they're down the street from you, it's probably easier for them to convince for you to work for them. But if they're somewhere in a different target country, you could probably reach out because you can jump on a Zoom call or whatever and connect. Um, but what would be kind of some of the ideal roles that you would look for, and then we can probably build you a little bit of a plan on how to start like moving towards landing a job with one of them.
So I think the starting point would be to identify a few firms, right? As you mentioned. So probably my first step would be to identify a few firms wherein it coincides with my interest and something which I'm also passionate about, right? And probably the next steps would be to connect with a couple of people and know what the company is actually supplying to the customers, or how is it benefiting the industry, right? And eventually, if I am also if our interests are coinciding, then I think something what I took from the experience is that you don't need to always send your resume. I think the distinguishing factor would be that you prove to the employers that you can actually do the work. Anyone can send your resume, but if you actually know the work they do, then that's what the employees are looking for. So I think that is one something that could help me differentiate amongst the other competitors I have for the jobs.
Absolutely, and it would probably be very good training, and it'd probably be very good feedback. Where even if the work you produce isn't perfect, at least you get feedback from a real professional, right? So yes, getting like 80%, 90 on your assignment is good, but those are kind of theoretical things versus this real finance person or accountant, investment banker, whatever it is, said that yeah, this is pretty solid, this is good, right? So I think you hit the nail on the head. Researching those firms, so going more broadly in terms of like using Google, using LinkedIn. One of the interesting things I found is to use Google Maps, right? So that you can take a look at from a proximity perspective, which ones are close by, right? Because if you're looking for like finance companies or firms or whatever, ones that are like in a 5 kilometer, 20 kilometer radius are probably more likely uh, to connect with you than someone who is 200 kilometers or even in a different country or whatever, right? So what you'll want to do is as you build this list is to prioritize them, right? Do a bit of research and say, okay, well, there could be things like proximity, there could be things like alumni, like who actually works there, or some sort of connection, right? It might be a friend or a family. It might be that you volunteered there, that person loves cricket as much as you, right? Or that person is part of a certain interest group or whatever. The more commonalities, the higher they're on your list, right? So maybe pick like a second tier or third tier kind of priority to try to experiment with and connect with, and then really hit hard on the top ones when you have kind of honed in your ability to network and connect. And yeah, you can use things like LinkedIn to connect with them. You can find emails. Some you might even be able to do phone calls. Although most people, when you kind of cold call out of the blue, it seems a little bit weird. A great way is to interact with them on social media, right? So if there's a company page, if there's the individuals, right? Like, engage, comment, and share out their posts, right? It's obviously easier if these companies are more active, but if they're less active, then well, it might be harder to get to them anyway, right? Um, but the ones that are more active, maybe that goes up on your priority list, right? And say something meaningful about it instead of just liking a post. uh, Write a comment and say, oh, I really like the trend that you mentioned about this or whatever, right? Or, oh yeah, I've experienced this myself by doing blah 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 blah, right? You can comment it and sharing more broadly as well. And if you're really willing to, then start becoming a person of interest, right? So blog about that topic, right? Through a post or whatever, and just share your thoughts broadly about what you learned today in finance, what you learned today in marketing, what you learned today in engineering, or whatever discipline that you're in, and then just share that. And people will have eyeballs on it and be like, who's this person, right? And becoming someone as that's out there can be very helpful. So yeah, definitely connect with them, and then as those other people, look to add value for them. Because what you can also do is offer to, yeah, I'll do whatever my skill allows me to do to help you, right? And if you can do that, think of it as kind of demonstrating your skills and your abilities to prove yourself, right? And that will probably help you skip the line of all the resumes and stuff like that, and get further ahead. Like I said, the extra mile is never crowded. So if you can come up with a creative way of how this sort of work can help you in the job search, and add value to the people that you're applying to, I think that will be a different approach than to go through the traditional apply online and hope and pray, right? So that's a different way to do that. So you can do that by individually adding value to a particular company, a particular person, or you can do it more broadly, where you're sharing it with the industry or the community in general, and seeing what sort of things come out of that. So yeah, which of those might be useful for you to do, or what other thoughts came to mind when I went through that?
I think it was extremely insightful. This is something which not many people have told me about. Maybe because I haven't actually bothered talking to many people about seeking a co-op, or just finding employment, because it's kind of a far-fetched topic right now.
Mhm.
It was always a little far-fetched until the last 2 months, wherein I was just too done with studying and I really wanted to get an internship. Right. So I think even at my university, we have a co-op department
Mhm.
which takes care of many other things. But, you know, the only factor which distinguishes, since we had a conversation today, is, networking with them outside, uh, like informally, or like, not only networking with them to secure the job, or selling yourself,
Mhm.
but to actually show them that you're passionate about this topic and you know how to do it, or else that you're willing to learn.
Mhm.
Your willingness and curiosity to learn will help them. I mean, you need not be perfect when they hire you, right? There needs to be some growth in you. So I think even at a university, we have a co-op department, and the only resources which I feel they provide are we have a few co-op courses wherein they help us tailor our resumes and stuff,
Mhm.
and they make us go through how to approach an interview, and they conduct some mock interviews. But one side which you gave me and which wasn't explained from their side was this of making a bond with them
Mhm.
outside their office hours.
Yeah, and what I'd encourage folks to think about, it's an investment in your future, right? Think of it as a relationship capital, right? You're making those small investments in the future, and this person that you connect with now might not be able to help, right? Because with any relationship, when you make a friend, it's not very common where the first time you interact, then you're best friends, right? Once in a while, you have that person who's like a fast friend, and you're like, oh, I felt like I've known you forever, but that's like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1,000,000 type of thing where not
Mhm.
everybody's like that. Most of the time you have to connect with them. Hey, how's it going? And then you see it again, like, oh, how's everything with whatever? And like, oh, I thought of you when I saw this, and then you keep going, and eventually you become uh, more than acquaintances. You're a little bit friends, right? Your colleagues and then your friends, right? That takes time, right? It's not something that happens overnight. That's why I encourage folks to think of networking like farming instead of hunting, right? Like if you plant a seed, it's like, where's my fruit? Right? You can't expect that. You got to water it. You got to take care of it. You got to give it sun, and then over time it grows, and eventually, oh, here's some sweet fruit. Even if you plant a fruit tree, it's not after like a bunch of years that it evolves into something. Some trees grow faster than others, and some trees are really slow to produce fruit, right? Some trees never produce fruit, right? And oftentimes that's because you haven't necessarily added enough value to this person for them to want to reciprocate, right? I'm a firm believer of karma. So if you start by giving first and helping the other person first, think of these people as basically friends that you haven't met yet, right? Or friends that you haven't developed a friendship with, developed a relationship with. So if you take that tack and say, okay, how do I make them more of a friend? Well, I probably have to pay attention to them a little bit more. I usually tell people that my answer to every how-to network question is to care, right? So if you think about it, the person on the other side is a human, right? They want to be cared for, right? Nobody wants to be used. Nobody wants to be like taken advantage of, right? People want to be cared. So get them to talk about themselves, be curious and interested in them, look to add value and help them, right? And if you can do that and invest that, the people that you connect with now to get an internship over the summer might not help you for the internship in the summer, but what about for the job after you graduate, right? If you've developed that relationship and you've incubated for 1, 2, 3 years, whatever it is, then that person might be able to help you there. Or maybe not when you graduate, maybe 5 years when you're looking to switch companies, right? Or looking for a promotion somewhere else, right? Like the world is small, especially in specific industries, right? People tend to know people, right? So first of all, be nice to everyone. Don't be in the habit of using people because oftentimes it comes back to bite you later on, right? So if you start and build those habits early, you'll be so surprised of the results because um, people often think that, oh, it's my skill and it's the things that I can do that'll set me apart. But I mean, it's so competitive, right? Everybody in your class has the same skills, right? Everybody in all the different schools in the similar programs you're competing with too, right? And there are hundreds, if not thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people you're competing with, right? So why you, right? And oftentimes it's just if I were to pick anyone from this giant stack of papers that are resumes here, I might as well pick someone that I know, someone that has treated me well, and maybe through different ways, and demonstrated that they can truly add value. Otherwise, I'm just making a bet, right? I'm hoping and praying that they'll be good, right? Which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, right? And one thing that I also encourage that when we talk about networking, in my opinion, volunteering is probably one of the best forms of networking, right? So when you find an organization that you're interested in, right? So go find the professional organization. So if you're interested in like finance and investments,
Yeah.
yeah. So go find an organization that caters to that group, right? the Association of Investment Professionals. I don't know if that exists, but I'm sure there's something like that. And then help them with their events or social media, or just help with I don't know, spreading the word, right? And then chances are, when you volunteer with them, you get access to all of those professionals, right? And you'll be more likely to be able to ask them for a coffee, for a Zoom chat, or whatever it is, right? And get to learn. And then that's an easier way to network, because if you're just cold messaging on LinkedIn, they might not respond, right? Versus someone who is, you were really helpful and answered so many of my questions at this event. The panelist that is like a senior VP or managing director at this company, they probably say, yeah, I can give you a few minutes. I would love to answer a few questions here and there because you were so helpful, right? But a random person on the street probably wouldn't be able to, because the funny thing is all those people who are volunteering with you, they have jobs, or they know people who have jobs, right? And one of them just might be the right decision maker to help you in that process, right? So, and if you're in that volunteer work, you're demonstrating value, then again, that's another way where you can get in. That's not the traditional apply online and hope and pray, right? So yeah, just another way of thinking about how to be a little bit more creative in your job search.
Those are some amazing thoughts. I will definitely keep in mind the next time I'm applying. Hopefully, I secure an internship in this fall by all the techniques you've told me, and hopefully my networking goes much better than it has been going.
Yeah. And the more time that you have to invest in it, the better results that you have. So again, just like that farming analogy, if you're hoping to harvest your crop in a month, it's probably not going to be as good as if you have a year or two to plan what you're going to be harvesting, right? So yeah, I think this hopefully gives some good guidance and insights for folks that are on the job hunt. And this applies not just for internships and co-ops, but also for the regular job hunt too, right? For full-time roles as well. But what of that are you going to make sure that you do? And what if it was kind of the ones that are like, oh, I never thought of that before?
I think most of the content was probably something which I never thought about. For example, networking and taking a chat, and like networking with them, not only for selling yourself, but actually to help them out, or to to get your questions answered. And I think I am going to take that insight quite seriously, because when I thought about it more deeply, I feel that is exactly what employers are looking for. Someone who's passionate and curious to learn more, to grow. Think think I will hopefully be set for my next internship after all these insights.
Sounds good. Yeah. And the important thing, I think, is to actually allocate the time to do it, right? So that's why I'm a huge advocate of that non-negotiable time, an hour a week, an hour a day to do all of these things, because otherwise school gets in the way, extracurriculars gets in the way, or family stuff gets in the way. And that stuff's important, but this stuff is important too. And just small little investments on a regular basis can do so much. One thing that I encourage folks to do is, as you're thinking about it, before you send off that note, before you try to connect with that person, imagine yourself in that person's shoes, right? Because a lot of people don't take the time to express that empathy and be on the other side. So imagine you worked as a VP or managing director at that company, and out of the blue, a random student, a random person just messages you, right? And says, hey, how's it going? I'm a whatever. Hopefully, I can learn about you, and you can help get me a job. It's like, how would you receive that note, right? Probably not very well.
Right.
But if you were more like, well, I really like your profile. I love the article that you posted on this. I would love to connect to learn more. It's like, okay, I'll probably accept that. And then
Yeah.
reach out and say, well, thank you so much for connecting. How are you doing? What have you been up to these days? And you sharing a little bit about yourself. So I've been doing this. I found a new book that I read, or I've been implementing this new exercise routine or whatever. And then engage in the conversation and learn a little bit more about them, share more about you. And then I generally recommend that don't bring up the conversation of job until they do, right? And when they do, it's fair game. But yeah, hopefully you can learn and grow, and we'd love to hear some of the progress, I guess, in future episodes, to see what worked and what didn't. So thanks a lot, Revant, for joining.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.